A few brief thoughts today around the sermon title. The trick is to look down, and I'll try to explain that somewhat strange title very shortly. On Stewardship Sunday, and listening to that scripture from an interesting part of the book of Proverbs. The question of how to live life while being content is an interesting one. Being content with your circumstances, does that not fly in the face of all self-improvement? Does that not cancel out ambition? Does that not prevent anybody from committing to at least trying to follow a spectacular career path, making the most of what your abilities are and getting somewhere in life? Is it not to say, right, I'm content with my circumstances, I'm grateful for what I have, and therefore all is good, all is well in the Shire. There's no need for exertion. There's no need to really try to get somewhere in life. I once asked a friend of mine who was always somewhat off the grid with his thoughts, unconventional approach. I asked him, "You always seem to be happy and content with life." He said, "Yeah, I don't let myself get upset with a lot of stuff." And I said, "How do you manage that?" Because he wasn't a slacker or anything, he was really a high-performing individual as well. And he said, "No, the trick is to look down." And I asked him, "What do you mean?" He said, "No, you just find somebody that's worse off than you are. And that's not difficult. You can just walk through town or you can watch the news, and then there's plenty of examples, and then I realize I should be happy with what I had." So he follows the comparative approach. Find something or somebody that is much worse than you have or that you are experiencing, and therefore it's easy to be grateful and easy to be content with life. However, I think that's not a very satisfactory approach. I see people practicing that, and I've practiced it myself over the last few years. When there is so much that's brought to us with terrible conditions somewhere in the world, when I would discuss it with a friend or a colleague, and we tend to get depressed, totally without hope, I would say, well, at least I am not born in Syria, and that would provide comfort, and you can carry on and face whatever you have to face. But again, that's not, I think, a very, very satisfying approach. The wisdom to live contently, and then the next step to live generously, is not a simple quest or a question to answer. We find those words or the themes reflected in the passage that we listened to from the book of Proverbs. A collection of ancient Middle Eastern wisdom, not only Hebrew wisdom, but there is at least traces of Egyptian wisdom in much of the book of Proverbs that the Hebrew authors incorporated in the text. And at least 7 major collections spread out through the book of Proverbs. Wisdom teachers or groups of people, schools of thought that collected the different sayings, the wisdom from their environment, trying to provide guidance for life, how to live well. What should you do to live a good life? And in much of it, there is at least the implied notion present that if you follow the rules, if you follow God's rules, God will reward you for that. That's not present everywhere and in all sayings, but it is there. This is how you live a good life, and a good life means to receive God's blessings. And if you follow the rules, you will be successful, you will have many, preferably male children, because it was a patriarchal age. You will have a lot of possessions. And the ideal life is for each, at least Israelite, to sit under his own fig tree, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, drinking the wine from his own grapevines. I don't have a fig tree yet, and I don't have that many children, but my grapevines, I'll try to make some wine next year and follow this guidance in that direction at least. But we find this expression of wisdom, and it is a collection that is said, these are the words of Agur, the son of Jakeh. We don't know who this Agur is, and it seems to me most scholars come down on the side that it's not actually a proper name of somebody, but probably a title of reverence or respect, or say, yeah, it is a good teacher, so we revere his words. We respect that. So what does Agur say? Agur provides one of the other themes that we generally encounter in the ancient wisdom, that of moderation. No excess, no exorbitant practice on either side. Live a life of moderation. And he says, as far as my life goes, there are two things. And you see this pattern throughout the rest of his words. 2 things, 3 things, 4 things. You can read it. It's very interesting, and it's beautiful poetry. Well constructed. But he focuses in this short passage on 2 things. One, to have enough food so that he's not hungry, and so that he does not steal to sustain himself. Contentment, to be satisfied just to have the basic necessities to get through life. And then also the other notion of truth. He expresses the wish that God will grant him the ability not to speak falsely and to live a life of integrity. If you look at this notion of contentment and living a life of moderation, we do not find as explicitly as in the rest of or that is quite often in the ancient wisdom, a reference to the direct relationship between following God's rules and receiving God's award. It is probably present in the background, but it doesn't state that very clearly. It comes more down on the side of being content, following the rules, and accepting what hand you're dealt in life. In the rest of the literature, we find a more direct relationship. And I think it is relevant for us on Stewardship Sunday and on Thanksgiving Sunday to ponder that, where do we come down? And what does it mean for us? And to which theology do we describe in the plethora of theologies that we find in the Bible around giving and generosity and contentment? Especially when it comes to monetary contributions. apart from time and talent and experience. In many churches today, in many settings, we find a fear-driven and a fear-manipulated expression of this direct relationship. Not only saying, if you follow God's rules, you will be rewarded, but even turning it around and say, you better pay up or God will punish you. If you don't give, you will experience all hell breaking loose in your life. Therefore give, but the motivation is out of fear. Give, otherwise God will not reward you, but punish you. They take it one step further. And it's not difficult to find those texts that you can build a case with if you thoroughly enough decontextualize them. If you take them as snippets and put your own interesting collection together and build your case on that. Because as I often say at Bible studies, if you torture any text in the Bible long enough, it will eventually confess to what you wanted to say. It's not difficult to do that. Just take some time and it takes some reading of the text of the Bible. I don't think I have to say that I reject that kind of approach, that fear-based approach. But just to get it on the record, I do reject it strongly. One reason is because I know it won't work with this crowd. No, but it's really a serious theological approach that I think that is not the way to go. Whatever our consideration is or how we see it, experiencing a feeling of contentment or a feeling of generosity and gratefulness that God has given you sufficient blessings to be grateful for. That is not automatically translate into giving money to the church. The people that work this leverage of fear so well, they are often very good at that, like a MVP player doing an intercept. They say, God needs the money. And as people give to God, they come in as God's banker. Intercept that donation and say, right, we will be God's banker. We will decide what to do with all this money that you have given to God. That, I think, is a devious approach and should be rejected very strongly. But for us then, what is the relationship between experiencing gratitude and gratefulness and generosity towards the church as institution or as community? I was privileged over the past few weeks to be here on a Sunday and listen to Mission Moments. And it struck me as, those are such good sermons that I wish I could just be quiet and sit down and don't say anything. Those were testimonies of people from the congregation, most of them from the leadership corps, that expressed well thought out, well considered, authentic and sincere thoughts on their experience and their view on why it is appropriate to feel that God's work is sufficiently present in this community. And the embodiment of God's love is sufficiently present in this community so that they are willing to establish that link and contribute towards the work of the church. What else can one say about that? I really don't have anything more to add, except from my side, gratitude. Gratitude that that spirit is present among the membership and in the leadership core. Gratitude that that spirit is present so that people on a regular basis part with their dollars as an expression of gratitude towards God and as an expression or a testimony that the link between this community and God's love is sufficiently present to make those contributions. I'm grateful for everyone that did that and that will do that this year and into the future. I'm grateful for those that contribute not only in monetary sense, but also time, talents, experience, so that the work of this church is not only relevant and concerning the members of the community and those associated with the community, but that reaches far beyond the confines of this building and the property on the other side of the green. Lives are touched in the broader community and across the world. I'm also grateful for the team that did this stewardship drive, that put it together. There was so much going on, and I lived through the anxiety of the time approaching, and we really didn't have this thing together yet. But people stepped up, and leaders stepped up, and I'm grateful for that time that you contributed and the talents you contributed as well. While we ponder the line between contentment, being content, and experiencing gratitude and gratefulness, and how all this plays out in our lives and in our relationship with God and our relationship with this community, with the church, let us continue to commit to the mission of the church that you will find on our website and that we are in the process of reformulating as well. But let us commit through our stewardship not only of the contributions in monetary terms, but in our stewardship of our own lives and the responsibility to be the light in the world and of the world. Let us commit to that and walk while we develop our own wisdom for the living of every day, also being grateful that we have this ancient text that testifies to the fact that there were people before us thinking about the same stuff, wrestling with the same questions. May we be a community of stewardship, committed to be and to embody God's love in the world. Amen.